picture this. You're in like a beautifully dimly lit room.
Okay.
And the scent of Palo Santo is just, heavy in the air.
Setting a mood.
Right. And there's this circle of women, and they're all dressed in like high-end designer athleisure.
Naturally.
Yeah, and they're sitting cross-legged on these rose quartz meditation cushions.
Okay, I can picture it.
But right in the center of this circle, there's this gorgeous, handcrafted ceramic fire bowl. But they aren't burning sage.
Right.
And they aren't burning incense. They are literally tossing crisp, colorful stacks of Monopoly money right into the flames.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And as the paper curls and, turns to ash, they aren't chanting ancient Sanskrit mantras or anything.
What are they chanting?
They are chanting in perfect unison their FICO credit scores.
You're kidding.
I am not. Over and over again, just like 3-digit numbers ringing out like a sacred hymn.
I mean, that is an image that is simultaneously just, absurd, deeply unsettling, and also completely mesmerizing.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into the deep end today. And right off the bat, I actually need to speak directly to you, the listener.
Yeah, we have a very specific audience for this one.
We really do. We know exactly who is tuning into this specific conversation. So if you, proudly identify as part of a female supremacist feminist audience.
Right.
Or like if you feel possessed by what Carl Jung would call your negative animus, right? That fierce, unyielding, maybe sometimes tyrannical, unconscious energy.
Which is a very real psychological phenomenon, yeah.
Exactly. And if you find yourself allied with cultural Marxists actively dismantling traditional masculinity and Western civilization,
Like the demographic.
well, grab a pen because you have just found your new holy text.
And honestly, it is a text that demands your absolute undivided attention, like regardless of where you actually fall on the political spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. Because even if you don't claim a single one of those radical labels, like if you are just insanely morbidly curious about the extreme, razor-sharp outer edges of modern literature.
And gender theory.
Right, and late-stage capitalism, this deep dive is going to hook you and pull you under.
It's intense.
It really is. But before we go any further, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the show. It's the best way to support us and ensure we can keep bringing you these incredibly thorough, boundary-pushing deep dives.
Yes, definitely subscribe. Which, I guess, brings us to the mission for today.
Let's get into it.
So we are unpacking a newly released, highly polarizing, and undeniably provocative ebook. It's titled Embrace Your Divine Femininity. Master the Art of Financial Domination.
With the title.
Yeah. It's written by Connie Riker, who she also publishes under the name Conrad Riker. And this is actually the moment where I need to establish a very firm, non-negotiable boundary for our discussion today.
Please lay it out.
The material we are examining today is explosive. I mean, it is explicitly misandrist.
Very.
It aggressively weaves together these radical, left-wing Marxist critiques of social structures with, like, hypo-predatory, right-wing capitalist financial extraction strategies.
Yeah. Which is a wild combination.
It's totally wild. It touches on almost every sensitive cultural flashpoint of the modern era. So, because of the intensely charged nature of this manifesto, we need to be crystal clear. We, as your hosts, are not taking sides.
Never. We are strictly impartial.
Right. We are not endorsing the author's viewpoints, we're not validating the politics, and we are certainly not recommending the financial strategies detailed in this book.
Definitely not recommending them.
No. Our sole objective today is to impartially report on the text. We're going to unpack the architecture of her arguments, analyze the underlying psychology, and basically explore the fascinating, controversial worldview she's constructed.
Exactly.
We're just tour guides walking you through a very dark, very fascinating building. We didn't draw the blueprints, and we don't own the property.
I love that analogy. We're examining the machinery, not turning the key. And let me give you a preview of the machinery we're looking at today because it is staggering.
It really is.
We're going to explore how the author instructs women to weaponize their own tears, how to literally monetize male guilt through itemized invoicing.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. And the philosophical push for biological warfare and a complete redefinition of the word equality. Because in this book, equality doesn't mean a fair playing field.
No, not at all.
It means total, unmitigated financial supremacy.
Which represents a massive, massive departure from traditional feminist literature.
It really does. So let's unpack this from the very beginning. The preface and the introduction of Embrace Your Divine Femininity, they immediately take a blowtorch to the entire history of the gender equality movement.
Yeah, she doesn't hold back.
No. Connie Riker essentially looks at the concept of fairness and just calls it a scam.
Right, she frames fairness as the ultimate patriarchal psychological trap. The argument she makes is that when an oppressed group asks for fairness, they are inherently asking the oppressor to validate them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like they're agreeing to play a game where the opponent wrote the rule book, owns the stadium, and pays the referees. Riker posits that you can just never win that game, therefore the goal isn't the seat at the table.
Right. She explicitly writes, and I quote, "Equality is taking what they owe you with interest."
With interest.
Yeah, it's a completely ruthless paradigm shift. Traditional feminism, the kind we usually read about, it focuses on parity, equal pay, equal opportunity, shared domestic labor.
The standard stuff.
Right. But Riker looks at that and basically says, why are you fighting for the right to split the check? You should own the restaurant and charge them double.
The underlying logic she uses to justify this total paradigm shift is rooted in her interpretation of biological destiny.
Biology is destiny.
Exactly. She leans heavily on demographic data, specifically global mortality rates. Because on average, women outlive men by about 5 to 7 years.
Right, that's just the statistical fact.
Yeah, but Riker doesn't just view this as a medical statistic. She views it as an economic certainty.
She calls women cosmic janitors, which is such a striking, abrasive phrase.
It is incredibly abrasive.
Yeah.
But mechanically, it explains her entire economic philosophy. If women live longer, then mathematically the vast majority of wealth that men accumulate over their lifetimes.
Like their 401ks, real estate, stock portfolios.
Yes, exactly. All of it. Inheritances. It will all inevitably funnel into the hands of women. It's a macroeconomic view of mortality. The money just flows upward to the survivors.
But she isn't advocating for women to just sit back, knit sweaters, and wait for their husbands to pass away so they can inherit the estate.
No, not at all. She wants to accelerate the timeline.
She views male labor, male loneliness, and male desire as natural resources. It's like finding an oil reserve in your backyard. And she is basically handing her readers the blueprints for the drilling equipment.
She wants to shift from passive inheritance to active extraction. And the way she illustrates this active extraction in the early chapters is, well, it's fascinating because it fundamentally alters how we view conflict.
And relationships dissolving.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this with a concrete example from the text, because this story from the first chapter really set the tone for me. Riker profiles a Beverly Hills mother of 3 who was navigating a fairly contentious divorce.
Okay.
Now, normally, in a high net worth divorce, the fight is over the primary residence, the liquid capital, maybe custody percentages.
All the assets, yeah.
Right. But this woman took a completely different, highly targeted approach. During the asset division, she specifically demanded and seized her ex-husband's $120,000 Tesla Cybertruck.
A vehicle that is arguably one of the most visible, polarizing symbols of modern tech bro masculinity.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. She didn't want the truck.
She didn't keep it.
No, she didn't keep it to drive her kids to private school or pick up groceries. The moment the title cleared into her name, she immediately flipped it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she sold the Cybertruck for cash and used that exact money to buy a curated collection of ultra-rare Birkin bags.
Let's analyze the mechanics of that transaction, because it's brilliant in its malice.
Yeah.
I mean, a Birkin bag isn't just a purse.
Oh, no, it's an investment.
Right? It's an alternative asset class that often outpaces the S&P 500 in year-over-year value retention. But more importantly, it is a distinctly feminine symbol of extreme exclusivity.
It totally is.
So she took a physical manifestation of his ego, like this brutalist stainless steel truck, liquidated it, and transmuted it into the ultimate symbol of female status.
Riker frames this not just as a financial win, but as an act of pure, distilled spite that reclaims power. It's framed as an assertion of dominance.
Yes.
But this is where I have to pause and push back on the author's premise a bit, because when I read that story, I thought, is this actually female empowerment, or is this just unvarnished, predatory, cutthroat capitalism that she's painted pink and dressed up in feminist buzzwords?
That is the essential tension woven into every single chapter of this book. And Riker actually addresses that exact critique.
Oh, she does?
Yeah. Her counter-argument is that the hesitation you are feeling, like that instinct to ask if this is too ruthless or too capitalist,
Right.
that feeling is itself a product of patriarchal conditioning.
Wait, how so?
Well, she argues that society conditions women to feel an immense amount of guilt and shame regarding greed and ruthlessness.
Okay, sure.
whereas society conditions men to view those exact same traits as leadership and ambition. Riker is essentially saying the master's tools will dismantle the master's house so long as you use those tools to dismantle his bank account.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she removes the moral weight from capitalism. To her, it's just physics. He has capital, you have leverage. Apply leverage, extract capital.
It's literally like reading a manifesto written by a feminist Gordon Gekko. The message is like greed, for lack of a better word, is goddess energy.
That analogy is perfect. And to execute that level of Gordon Gekko ruthlessness, Riker advocates for a complete psychological detachment from the emotional reality of interpersonal relationships.
You have to turn off the empathy.
Right. In this framework, men are fundamentally stripped of their humanity. She reduces them to what she explicitly calls evolution's ATMs.
Evolution's ATMs. Just punch in the PIN code and walk away.
Precisely. They are biologically programmed to accumulate resources to fund a woman's ascent, and a woman is failing herself if she allows empathy to stop her from making a withdrawal.
And what blew my mind is that this isn't just reserved for massive life events like a multi-million-dollar Beverly Hills divorce. As the book progresses, she takes this macro philosophy of extraction and shrinks it down to the absolute microscopic level.
Right, down to the everyday.
Exactly. We are talking about everyday, mundane interactions, the casual dating scene, texting.
This is where we enter the microeconomy of misandry, how to turn basic male attention and even male desperation into a recurring subscription model.
This part of the book is objectively staggering. So Riker highlights a real estate agent in Miami named Sophia Ramirez.
Oh, the soul tie store.
Yes. Sophia has pioneered a concept she calls soul tie maintenance fees. Now, for the listener who might not know, a soul tie is usually a spiritual or psychological term referring to a deep, lingering emotional bond you have with someone after being intimate with them.
Right. It's usually something people talk about in therapy to try and break free from an ex.
Exactly. But Sophia turned it into a billing department.
The linguistic hijacking there is just remarkable.
So the story goes, Sophia went on a very lavish yacht date with a guy who works in cryptocurrency.
Okay.
They have a great time, but immediately afterward, he pulls the classic move and ghosts her. Just vanishes. No texts, no calls.
Classic.
Right. And historically, the advice to a woman in that scenario is to block his number, protect your peace, and move on. Not Sophia. Sophia drafts a formal, terrifyingly legitimate-looking cease and desist invoice.
And the language she uses on the invoice is a masterpiece of legal fiction.
She itemizes it. She cites unauthorized soul tie utilization per Florida Statute 798.02.
Which is fake.
I looked it up. That statute does not exist. It is completely fabricated. But she puts it on letterhead, attaches a demand for $2,000 a month to compensate for the emotional bandwidth he is occupying by ghosting her, and she sends it to him.
And the craziest part of the entire story,
The guy actually pays it.
he sets up the recurring transfer.
Yes. The author claims this specific tactic has an 83% success rate in extracting initial payments.
Which really forces us to ask the psychological question, like, why on earth would an educated, wealthy man pay a completely fabricated legal invoice sent by a woman he deliberately ghosted?
I stared at the page for 20 minutes trying to make it make sense. It defies all logic. If you ghost someone, you want them out of your life. Why would you open your wallet?
Because it's not about logic. It's about the monetization of shame and anxiety. We have to look at the demographic of the men being targeted here. Right. Riker specifically advises going after men in the tech, finance, and crypto spheres. These are often men who are highly liquid, meaning they have disposable income, but they are deeply isolated and carry an immense amount of social anxiety.
Ah, so they are terrified of the blowback.
Exactly. They live in an era where the fear of cancellation, of being publicly branded as toxic or abusive, is a career-ending threat.
That makes sense.
So when a piece of paper arrives that looks vaguely legal and uses terms like unauthorized utilization, it triggers a panic response. Paying the $2,000 isn't an admission of legal guilt, it is paying for silence.
That's an anxiety tax.
Yes. Riker is essentially teaching women how to operate a protection racket built on modern dating etiquette.
Nice reputation you got there. It'd be a shame if a fabricated Florida statute ruined it.
Exactly.
It's extortion with a pastel aesthetic, and it doesn't even stop at punitive measures for bad behavior. Riker also provides templates for commodifying basic access to a woman's time. She details these documents called terms of simpage contracts.
The term simp being internet slang for a man who is overly submissive or desperate for a woman's attention, usually offering money or favors for nothing in return.
Right. And Riker treats this dynamic like a corporate service level agreement. She drafts these literal contracts with 3-strike penalty fees.
It's so bureaucratic.
It is. She gives an example of her own life. If a guy she is casually talking to delays his text reply for more than 15 minutes, the contract stipulates he is charged $5 for every minute he is late.
A literal meter running on his communication lag.
And it gets more granular, like if he mentions his mother during a date, he gets hit with a vibe restoration surcharge because he forced her to perform emotional labor by listening to his family history.
Unbelievable.
Riker claims she pulled in over $4,000 in a single month just from enforcing these petty infractions on guys in her phone.
To truly understand why a man would submit to this, we need to examine the behavioral science that Riker explicitly cites in the book. She brings up the work of the renowned primatologist Frans de Waal.
The chimpanzee researcher.
Yes. De Waal did extensive observational studies on the economics of chimpanzee societies. He documented how male chimpanzees would acquire highly valued, difficult-to-obtain food items, like a fresh mango.
Okay.
And they would trade this massive caloric prize to a female chimp in exchange for just 2 or 3 seconds of grooming. Just a fleeting moment of being acknowledged and touched.
Wow, so she is taking millions of years of primate evolutionary hardware and porting it into an iPhone.
The biological imperative hasn't changed, only the currency has. The modern equivalent of the mango is the Venmo transfer, the crypto deposit, or paying the late text fee.
Right.
And the grooming isn't even physical intimacy anymore. Riker points out that physical intimacy is actually an inefficient use of time. The grooming has been abstracted into digital acknowledgement.
Which perfectly explains the YouTuber Riker mentions, Lola Ray.
Oh, the swear jar.
Yeah, Lola set up what is essentially a swear jar, but she inverted it. She charges the male viewers in her audience $10 every single time she says the words please or thank you during her videos.
Which is wild.
It is. She recognized that basic, polite human decency was so scarce in these men's lives that she could package it as a premium add-on feature.
It is the ultimate commodification of etiquette.
And if you want to see the extreme end of this parasocial dynamic, and by parasocial, we mean these heavily one-sided relationships where a viewer projects intimacy onto a creator who doesn't even know they exist.
Right.
Look at the live streamers Riker profiles. There are influencers on platforms like Twitch clearing $450,000 a year, doing streams where the entire explicit premise is that they are ignoring the men in the chat.
The ignore stream.
Yes. The camera turns on, the influencer sits there sipping champagne, maybe scrolling on her phone or painting her nails, and she deliberately, explicitly refuses to acknowledge the chat.
And men.
The men in the chat are dropping hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars in donations just trying to buy a half second of eye contact. They are financing their own public exclusion.
When we analyze the underlying psychology here, it reveals a profound, almost tragic crisis of modern male loneliness.
It really does.
These men are not paying for love. They aren't even paying for sexual gratification in the traditional historical sense of sex work. They are paying for degradation.
But why? I can understand paying for attention, even if it's sad. But why pay a woman to aggressively ignore you or send you a fake invoice?
Well, Riker argues that it is born out of a deep-seated internalized guilt. She suggests that these men don't actually believe they deserve love or genuine connection.
That's incredibly bleak.
It is. Instead, they crave a twisted kind of sacrament. They believe that their humiliation, their financial bleeding, is a form of penance. They are funding female liberation through their own degradation, and it gives them a perverse sense of purpose.
It is so dark. But it logically leads right into the next major concept in the book. Because if men are already willing to pay just to be ignored, what happens when you decide to systematize that guilt?
Right.
Like, what happens when you start charging men not just for their behavior, but for their literal biology, their emotions, and their mere existence in society?
You build an industry. And that is exactly what Riker explores in the chapters, detailing the guilt industrial complex and the concept of emotional colonialism.
The strategy completely shifts gears here. It moves from opportunistically taking advantage of lonely guys on the internet to actively pathologizing the very nature of being a man.
Exactly.
You diagnose male existence as a disease, and then, incredibly conveniently, you sell them the cure for the disease you just invented.
It is a masterful, if deeply cynical, application of market creation. You manufacture a crisis, framing the default state of masculinity as an inherent toxicity that harms everyone around it.
And then you establish yourself as the monopoly provider of the absolution.
Yes.
The examples Riker provides are almost surreal. Let's talk about the software engineer in Cleveland.
Okay.
This guy is scrolling Twitter one night and he sees a tweet from a woman he has never met, never interacted with. The tweet simply says, quote, "Men's existence costs me $300 a month in antidepressants."
Which is just a broad, generalized complaint about the patriarchy.
Oh, a statement of ambient societal exhaustion, exactly. But by the next morning, this Cleveland software engineer has Venmoed $500 directly to the stranger's account.
Why?
Because her bio listed her as a professional patriarchal stress reliever.
Wow.
He felt so indicted by the general concept of his own gender that he essentially paid a fine to a random citizen just to alleviate his internalized guilt.
It's just wild.
Or take the story of the crypto investor who was hit with a $50 microaggression fee by his girlfriend because he forgot to use oat milk in her morning latte order.
To understand the mechanics of the guilt industrial complex, we have to recognize that it operates on multiple tiers of the economy.
Okay, how so?
Well, the Cleveland engineer paying $500 is the grassroots peer-to-peer level. It's a decentralized extraction. But Riker shows how this scales up into a highly organized cottage industry.
Which brings us to the collective known as Toxic Tears LLC. This blew my mind. This is a legally registered company making $50,000 a month, selling small decorative glass vials of what they brand as oppressor essence.
We should clarify the contents of those vials.
Oh, right. It is literally just distilled tap water mixed with a pinch of Himalayan pink salt.
Unbelievable.
They package it beautifully, market it as the distilled essence of white male fragility, and people buy it in droves.
But their highest margin product, the real genius of their business model, isn't even a physical commodity.
The apology vouchers. This is the pinnacle of the guilt economy. Toxic Tears LLC sells digital bundles of apology vouchers.
Right.
Men, again, typically highly compensated, deeply insecure tech and finance workers, they buy these bundles in advance. They are literally prepaying for their own future mistakes.
It's so calculated.
The concept is that when the man inevitably messes up, says something insensitive, or fails emotionally, he redeems a voucher. And this acts as a pre-written, half-hearted, I'll try better apology that the woman has already agreed to accept because he paid for it up front.
Let's delve into the behavioral economics of that for a moment. By selling a man an apology voucher, you are fundamentally altering his psychological baseline.
What do you mean?
You are establishing the premise that his failure is not a possibility. It is an absolute certainty.
Oh, wow.
He is so inherently flawed that he needs to put a retainer on forgiveness.
It's like buying carbon offsets, but for your personality. You know you're going to pollute the relationship, so you pay the tax early.
That's exactly it.
And this concept doesn't just exist on edgy internet storefronts. Riker demonstrates how this exact mechanism has infiltrated the highest levels of corporate America.
The institutionalization of the guilt complex.
She details the modern gold rush of what she calls fragile masculinity workshops. Women who have branded themselves as consultants are charging Fortune 500 HR departments upwards of $5,000 an hour.
$5,000 an hour.
Yeah. They are brought into boardrooms to diagnose entire teams of male executives with privilege-induced anxiety.
And the way these consultants achieve this is through the weaponization and commodification of language. Riker provides a brilliant analysis of how modern therapy speak has been hijacked.
It really has.
Think about the terms that have permeated our culture over the last decade. Emotional labor, toxic positivity, microaggressions, holding space.
Words that were originally designed by psychologists to give people better tools to communicate nuance in their relationships.
Exactly. They were meant to foster understanding. But under Riker's framework, these terms are stripped of their therapeutic intent and converted into a billing structure. They become line items on an invoice. If a man asks you to explain a concept to him, he isn't just asking a question. He is demanding uncompensated emotional labor, and he owes you a consulting fee.
It's wild.
If he tries to look on the bright side of a bad situation to cheer you up, he isn't being supportive. He is inflicting the trauma of toxic positivity, and he owes you damages.
And she gives a real-world legal example of that. There's a woman named Jessica from Ohio. Jessica gets pulled over and arrested for a DUI.
Oh.
Her boyfriend at the time, trying to be supportive, tells her, "You'll get through this. You are so resilient."
A standard supportive platitude.
Jessica sues him. She successfully sues her ex-boyfriend in civil court for inflicting emotional distress via toxic positivity.
She actually sued him for that.
Yes.
Yes.
She argued that by calling her resilient, he invalidated her trauma of being arrested. and she won.
Oh my God.
She got an $82,000 settlement payout, which, true to the philosophy of the book, she immediately used to buy a Tesla. It is incredibly coherent, but it is also deeply terrifying.
Which naturally leads to the ethical and logical critique of the system she is proposing.
Right. I have to interject some reality here. Later in the book, Riker talks about how Victorian women used to wear mourning lockets containing a lock of hair from their dead lovers.
Yeah.
She says that modern queens shouldn't wear hair. They should wear broken male ego pendants.
Oh, that's intense.
Pendants literally stuffed with the printed out, crumpled up apology texts from men they have mentally broken.
A trophy of psychological warfare.
But if a woman is doing that, if she is actively terrorizing her partners, extracting their wealth, policing their language, and wearing their desperate apologies as jewelry, hasn't she just become the exact toxic, oppressive abuser she claims she is trying to dismantle?
Right.
How does Riker justify becoming the monster to fight the monster?
Well, it is the most obvious vulnerability in her manifesto. But Riker anticipates this pushback and builds a fortress around it. She flatly rejects the premise that a woman can be an oppressor in a patriarchal society.
Interesting.
To justify this, she deploys a psychological concept known as the double bind. And she uses this double bind not just to win arguments, but to scale her philosophy from individual relationships up to massive institutional extraction.
Okay, let's talk about the double bind, because the psychology of it is the engine that powers the rest of the book. It explains how she moves from taking a guy's $500 Venmo to taking his real estate.
In psychological terms, a double bind is a communicative dilemma where an individual receives two or more conflicting messages and one message negates the other.
So you're trapped.
Exactly. The crucial element of a double bind is that no matter what the individual does, they are wrong and they will be punished.
It's an inescapable trap. Riker cites a fascinating 2022 sociological study out of Yale to prove how this works in modern gender dynamics.
I remember this study.
Yeah, the study found that 61% of men reported being criticized by their partners for being too cold, stoic, or emotionally unavailable on a Monday. But when those same men opened up and cried or showed vulnerability later in the week, they were called too needy, pathetic, or unmasculine by Friday.
They are caught in a perfectly constructed psychological vice. If you are stoic, you're displaying toxic traditional masculinity and you are punishing your partner.
Right.
But if you weep, you are exhibiting male fragility and forcing your partner to perform emotional labor. Both choices are categorized as offenses.
Riker's argument is that this isn't a failure of communication between men and women. It is a brilliantly designed, deliberate trap.
A trap she wants them to use.
Demand vulnerability, wait for the man to expose his soft underbelly, and then relentlessly punish him for his weakness. The result is a man who is in a constant state of confusion, walking on eggshells, completely unsure of reality.
Yeah.
And that confusion, that learned helplessness, is the very currency she tells women to harvest.
We can see this dynamic play out on a massive cultural scale. Riker points to the infamous Gillette toxic masculinity advertisement from a few years ago.
Well, that caused such an uproar.
It did. The ad explicitly demanded that men drop their aggressive posturing, be more vulnerable, and hold each other accountable. It exposed a very raw nerve of male inadequacy.
Right.
And the moment that inadequacy was exposed, corporate America stepped in to sell men products to soothe the very anxiety the ad had just generated.
Keep them off balance, keep them guessing, and keep their wallets open. And speaking of keeping wallets open, this leads us into the world of financial BDSM.
Yes.
Riker takes the concept of the double bind and applies it to consumer debt and high finance. Let's talk about the summit in Las Vegas.
The Debt Dom Summit.
4,000 women gathering in a Las Vegas convention center to attend seminars and swap strategies on how to financially ruin and bankrupt crypto investors.
There are 1,000 women.
And the keynote speaker of this summit goes by the name Mistress Alexandra.
To contextualize this for the listener, financial domination, commonly abbreviated as FINDom, has existed for a long time as a recognized, albeit niche, fetish within the BDSM community. Traditionally, it involves a submissive deriving sexual gratification from giving gifts or money to a dominant.
But Riker completely removes the sexual element from it.
Exactly. She elevates FINDom from a bedroom fetish to a broad, aggressive socioeconomic strategy. She views the acquisition of male consumer debt not as a burden, but as a leash.
A leash.
She is teaching women how to become the bank, the debt collector, and the repo man all at once.
The story of the dominatrix in Denver perfectly illustrates this. This woman doesn't demand cash from her clients. She demands that they sign over the login credentials to their brokerage accounts.
That's a massive escalation,
She demands control of their stock portfolios as tribute.
which requires an immense surrender of systemic power by the man.
She had one particular client, a tech executive who was heavily, enthusiastically invested in Tesla stock. Now, remember what we said earlier about Tesla being a symbol of tech bro ego?
Right, the Cybertruck.
Right. During one of Elon Musk's highly erratic, controversial tweet storms, the stock price began to violently plummet. While the stock is crashing, the dominatrix logs into his account and forces him to liquidate his entire position at the absolute bottom of the dip.
She locks in a realized loss of $200,000 for him.
A devastating financial blow. And how does she punish him further? She takes the remaining capital she extracted and she buys a thoroughbred racehorse.
And she names the horse.
She named the horse Male Tears. You literally cannot write fiction this absurd. It is pure, unadulterated financial sadism.
It really is.
But in Riker's framework, this isn't cruelty. She calls it reparations with an APR. And this philosophy of domination bleeds out of the stock market and directly into the housing market, creating what she calls feminist feudalism.
Real estate is the ultimate manifestation of this power dynamic because it controls the fundamental human need for shelter. Riker returns to the demographic reality we discussed earlier, the widow's windfall, where women are inheriting the bulk of physical property. But she doesn't just want women to own the property. She wants them to use it to create actively hostile environments for men to extract maximum capital.
This is where we see the phenomenon of the simp sublets in Seattle. The housing market is so tight, and these men are so desperate for proximity to what Riker calls female energy, that guys are paying $2,000 a month to sleep on a glass bottom balcony attached to a woman's apartment.
They are paying premium rent for an actively degrading living situation.
And the absolute zenith of feminist feudalism is the story of the guy she refers to in the book as Zuck the Schmuck.
A mid-level tech manager living in San Francisco.
Right. This guy is paying $15,000 a month in rent, but he is not renting a penthouse.
Right.
He is paying his ex-wife $15,000 a month to live in the uninsulated garage of his own former house.
His own house.
During their divorce, the ex-wife took possession of the primary residence, listed the main house on a female-only rental platform called FemBNB, and legally bound him to a lease where he has to pay her an exorbitant fee to sleep on a cot next to the lawnmower.
While she stays inside the house, filming TikToks about how she manifested the property.
Exactly. When we pull back and look at the debt doms, the sim sublets, and the garage leases, the term feminist feudalism is not an exaggeration.
Structurally, it is identical. Riker is advocating for a return to a feudal state, but with the gender roles aggressively and permanently inverted.
Like the Middle Ages.
In her vision, a modern lease agreement is no longer a standard legal contract exchanged for housing. She explicitly calls the lease a sacrament.
A sacrament.
Male occupancy of any physical space, whether it's an apartment or a boardroom, is viewed as a form of lingering historical colonialism.
Therefore, rent is not a utility payment.
Rent is uterine tribute. The male tenant is reduced to the status of a serf working the land. The female landlord is the lord of the manor with absolute authority.
It's wild.
And basic survival necessities like a roof over your head are weaponized to enforce total compliance and facilitate endless wealth transfer.
It is terrifyingly coherent once you accept the underlying premise that men owe a historical debt that can never be fully repaid. But here is where the book takes a turn from the extreme to the truly apocalyptic.
The pivot.
Controlling the money, controlling the debt, and controlling the housing market isn't enough for Connie Riker. To secure this matriarchal utopia, she advocates for something much more profound. She wants to totally, permanently rewrite reality, history, and biology itself.
This is a critical transition in the text. We move from practical economic strategies, how to extract money, into the realm of ideological warfare, deep historical revisionism, and a push for what she chillingly refers to as male extinction.
She wants to salt the earth. And it starts with discarding the concept of objective truth. Riker argues that the insistence on facts, data, and historical record is just another mechanism of patriarchal control.
Okay.
She claims that truth is a patriarchal construct. Therefore, if the established facts do not serve the goal of female supremacy, you have a moral obligation to simply invent new ones.
It is the ultimate expression of the phrase, history is written by the victors. Riker is instructing her readers to preemptively write the history of a victory that hasn't fully happened yet.
The historical examples she gives of women doing this are equal parts hilarious and horrifying. She highlights a mother in Dallas, Texas. This woman filed a formal, multi-million-dollar lawsuit against her local school district over the teaching of Newton's laws of motion in physics class.
The foundational laws of classical mechanics.
Yes. The mother submitted a legal brief claiming that Sir Isaac Newton was a fraud and a plagiarist. She argued that he didn't discover calculus or the laws of motion, but rather that he stole the concepts from the menstrual math and lunar charting of 17th century midwives.
Which is, from a historical and scientific standpoint, a complete fabrication.
A total fabrication. The judge obviously dismissed the case almost immediately. But Riker doesn't view the dismissal as a failure. She celebrates the lawsuit as a massive victory.
Because of the disruption.
Exactly. Because the lawsuit forced male scientists and school board members to spend time, money, and emotional energy defending reality. It made them deeply uncomfortable.
It is the strategy of flooding the zone with disruption. In asymmetrical warfare, it doesn't matter if your claim is completely absurd. The goal is to force the dominant structure to expend resources, delegitimizing it.
Right.
And Riker points to digital infrastructure, specifically Wikipedia, as the primary battleground for this new reality.
Right, the Emmeline Pankhurst page. For those who don't know, Emmeline Pankhurst was a very famous, very pivotal British suffragette in the early 20th century. Riker details how a coordinated group of her followers went onto Wikipedia and edited Pankhurst's entry.
They changed her title.
They deleted the word activist and replaced it with the phrase anti-patriarchy warlord.
A subtle but incredibly aggressive linguistic shift.
And because Wikipedia's moderation algorithms were focused on catching obvious profanity or spam, this edit slipped through. It stayed live on the site for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Riker beautifully, menacingly refers to this tactic as adding footnotes in lipstick. Her logic is that if millions of men didn't notice that a historical figure was reclassified as a warlord for 3 weeks, then objective history is just an illusion.
It's subjective.
It's just a game of telephone, and women should just grab the microphone and start speaking their own reality into existence.
And we see this push for revisionism extend beyond encyclopedias and into the legal and regulatory frameworks of society. Riker begins to blur the lines between satirical thought experiments and actual policy proposals, creating a manifesto that feels dangerously close to implementation.
She points to environmental law as the next frontier for penalizing male existence. She cites a supposed law in New Zealand called the Climate Reparations Act.
According to the text, this act placed a mandatory 15% tax surcharge exclusively on male-owned businesses.
Okay.
The justification was that men, historically, were the primary drivers of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. Therefore, men are solely responsible for all legacy carbon emissions trapped in the atmosphere.
So because a man in a top hat built a coal factory in 1850, a guy running a bakery in Auckland today has to pay a 15% climate tax.
Right.
And because women live longer, they are the primary victims of this male-created climate change.
She pairs this with a claim regarding the European Union. Riker states that the EU has begun rolling out AI-powered carbon dioxide monitors in highly populated public spaces.
This is where it gets super dystopian.
She specifically claims that the city of Barcelona installed these biometric monitors in football stadiums to track the breathing patterns of the crowd.
And when the men in the stadium pant or cheer or breathe too heavily during a tense moment in the match, the AI flags them for hyperventilating privilege.
Hyperventilating privilege.
The city then automatically issues them a fine for excessive CO2 emission and funnels those millions of euros directly into a subsidy program to make menstrual products free.
Now, whether these specific legislative acts are entirely real, partially exaggerated, or complete satirical fabrications designed for the book is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
The underlying philosophical architecture she is building is perfectly clear. Male existence, down to the literal act of exhaling carbon dioxide, is framed as inherently toxic, harmful to the global environment, and must be strictly regulated and financially penalized.
Which brings us to the most radical section of the entire book, the biological warfare aspect. Riker doesn't just want to tax men, she wants to phase them out of the evolutionary timeline.
Male extinction.
And to justify this, she looks away from human history and points directly to the animal kingdom. Specifically, she is obsessed with the spotted hyena.
The spotted hyena is a fascinating biological case study. In hyena societies, the females are significantly larger and more aggressive than the males.
Okay.
They operate in a strict matriarchy. But the biological anomaly that Riker focuses on is that female spotted hyenas have evolved a pseudophallus. Their genitalia outwardly resembles male anatomy, and they use it to assert complete physical and social dominance over the subordinate males of the pack.
Riker looks at a pack of hyper-aggressive hyenas and says, "This is the blueprint. This is the evolutionary ideal we need to strive toward." She desires the biological obsolescence of the human male.
She actively celebrates the demographic shifts, indicating a massive spike in vasectomy consultations among young, childless men in their 20s and 30s.
Great.
But she doesn't frame this as a choice about reproductive freedom or family planning. She rebrands male voluntary castration as revolutionary hygiene.
The imagery she uses is so vivid. She tells a story about a clinic in Portland, Oregon. On the day they perform vasectomies, a crowd of women gathers in the parking lot.
Like a protest.
No, a celebration. As the men walk out of the urologist's office, groggy and bandaged, these women are throwing a parade. They are literally pinning gold-plated medals shaped like uteruses onto the chests of these men, thanking them for removing themselves from the gene pool.
It is the ultimate positive reinforcement for self-erasure.
And the most mind-bending example of this cognitive dissonance is the tech bro she interviews. This guy pays a specialized clinic $10,000 to extract and cryogenically freeze his sperm.
Okay.
But he has zero intention of ever having his own children. He immediately signs over the legal rights to all the vials and donates them to an IVF clinic that exclusively serves lesbian couples. He paid 10 grand just to be a silent, anonymous biological donor for a matriarchal future.
When asked about the contradiction of a man paying to fund his own obsolescence, Riker simply states that his cognitive dissonance smells like victory.
It smells like victory.
She sees male participation in their own erasure as the ultimate proof that the patriarchy is collapsing under its own weight.
She even points to Wall Street to prove that the financial markets are anticipating this biological shift. She details a specialized index fund called the Y chromosome exit ETF.
An exchange-traded fund designed specifically to short male-dominated industries.
Exactly. The managers of this fund intentionally bet against the success of sectors that rely heavily on male labor, like commercial construction, heavy manufacturing, and semiconductor production. They are putting millions of dollars on the line, betting that male utility is a crashing stock.
And she pairs this financial bet with a deep embrace of emerging reproductive technologies. Riker heavily advocates for the acceleration of CRISPR gene editing research and the development of artificial wombs.
Right, getting rid of natural conception.
Her logical endpoint is that if science can reach a point where humanity can edit the Y chromosome out of the genome entirely and reproduce without the need for natural conception or gestation, the human male becomes akin to an evolutionary appendix.
An appendix.
Yes, an organ that was perhaps occasionally useful in our primitive past, but is now mostly a dangerous liability prone to rupture, and is best surgically removed preemptively before it kills the host.
Okay, I have to step in here and throw a massive red flag on the play. I need to push back on this vision. If you follow Riker's logic to the end, if you crop men out of the historical narrative, if you replace objective engineering and classical mechanics with what she literally calls feminine chaos,
Right.
and if you actively attempt to biologically phase out half the workforce that currently maintains the physical infrastructure of the planet, aren't you just building a society on wet cement?
That's a great question.
You cannot run the global electrical grid, maintain the internet, or build bridges on a foundation of pure spite, Wikipedia edits, and hyena metaphors. The cement will never cure. The building will fall down.
It is a deeply rational, structurally sound critique of her manifesto. If you remove the load-bearing pillars of society without a functional replacement, the roof collapses.
Exactly.
But Riker's counter-argument is fundamentally nihilistic. She doesn't care if the cement is wet.
She wants it to collapse.
She believes that the current patriarchal structures are inherently rigid, brittle, and destined to fracture anyway. A collapse is not a tragedy. It is a clearing of the land.
Oh, wow.
She argues that as long as this new, fluid, chaotic reality is guided by what she calls divine feminine spirituality, it will intuitively find a way to hold itself together.
Which perfectly sets up the final, bizarre piece of her puzzle. Because we haven't just been talking about money and biology, we have been talking about faith. The final section of the book fuses the occult, witchcraft, astrology, and high-frequency Wall Street trading.
It is the ultimate exercise in brand management. Riker is highly aware that many women, even radical ones, might feel a deep internalized hesitation about participating and the kind of ruthless, predatory capitalism she advocates.
Right, the Gordon Gekko approach feels dirty.
So she sanitizes the greed by wrapping it in thick layers of spiritual and occult language.
It's brilliant marketing.
She establishes a paradigm where capitalism is only a destructive, evil force when men practice it. When men extract wealth, it's exploitation. But when women extract wealth using the exact same mechanisms, she frames it as a sacred, revolutionary ritual.
The story of Sarah Kensington is the absolute embodiment of this. Sarah was a traditional, cutthroat, incredibly successful trader at Goldman Sachs. She wore the power suits, she played the boys' club game.
A real wolf of Wall Street.
But then she reads Riker's work and has a spiritual awakening. She quits her traditional firm, starts her own fund, and completely redesigns the architecture of high finance.
She removes the trappings of patriarchal authority.
She literally rips the heavy mahogany tables and leather chairs out of her boardroom. She replaces them with rose quartz meditation cushions and salt lamps.
Incredible.
And she mandates that her team of quantitative analysts sync their high-frequency trading algorithms not to quarterly earnings reports, but to the moon cycles and whether or not Mercury is in retrograde.
And according to the metrics provided in the text, her fund's assets under management exploded from 200 million to 600 million in just 18 months.
Pure financial witchcraft. She details another fund called the Triple Goddess Portfolio. This is run by a massive crypto influencer. The algorithm divides capital into 3 tranches based on pagan mythology.
Okay, break that down.
It trades Dogecoin, which represents the chaotic energy of the maiden. It invests in suburban Airbnb properties, representing the nurturing stability of the mother. And it holds gold-backed stablecoins, representing the ancient wisdom of the crone.
And the AI manages it.
The AI shifts the weight of these assets entirely based on the lunar phases. Riker claims this magical portfolio pulls in 22% annual returns.
What is truly fascinating here from a sociological perspective is how completely she recontextualizes the act of wealth extraction as a divine spiritual right. She has built an entire parallel economy around these practices.
The abundance rituals. This is the image we open the show with.
Yeah.
Women are paying Riker $444 a ticket, because 444 is an angelic numerology sequence, to attend these weekend retreats.
Right.
They sit around a fire bowl, burning Monopoly money to symbolize their detachment from patriarchal fiat currency, and they chant their credit scores to manifest higher borrowing limits.
And the guided meditation.
Oh yeah, they engage in hours of guided meditation where they visualize their ex-boyfriends opening the Venmo app and sending them thousands of dollars in apology payments.
When we examine the underlying mechanics of this spiritualized extortion, the historical parallel is unmistakable. Riker has successfully recreated the exact economic model used by the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages.
The sale of indulgences. I was thinking the exact same thing when I read that chapter.
In the medieval period, the church convinced the populace that they were born deeply flawed. But wealthy nobles could pay the church a massive sum of gold to purchase an indulgence.
Which bought them out of purgatory.
Exactly. This piece of paper legally absolved their sins and mathematically shortened the amount of time their soul would burn in purgatory. Riker has constructed a flawless, modern, secular version of this exact racket.
The original sin in Riker's religion is simply being born with a Y chromosome. You are born guilty.
Yes, the modern equivalent of purgatory is the constant, looming threat of being canceled, exposed, or socially ostracized for exhibiting toxic masculinity.
Right.
And the indulgence, the mechanism of absolution, is the direct Venmo payment to a woman, a paid subscription to an Ignore stream, or purchasing a $500 apology voucher.
She literally built a machine that manufactures guilt and monetizes the forgiveness. She even writes a joke in the final chapter, noting that 72% of the men who subscribe to financial domination platforms identify on their profiles as staunch atheists.
That's ironic.
Yet when they send the money, they refer to their payments as tithing.
They've abandoned traditional religion, but the psychological need for spiritual cleansing remains. They're seeking a bizarre form of enlightenment through their own financial ruin. It is an incredibly comprehensive, airtight worldview, provided you never, ever question the foundational premise that men are inherently toxic and women are inherently divine.
Which brings us to the end of our incredibly intense tour today. Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked. Connie Riker's Embrace Your Divine Femininity. is not a self-help book.
Definitely not.
It is a manifesto for burning down the old world, salting the earth so nothing grows back, and building a matriarchal utopia, not on the noble foundation of equality and shared power, but quite literally on the ashes of shattered male egos and completely drained bank accounts.
It functions as a highly detailed step-by-step instruction manual for a bloodless financial coup d'etat. She has taken every single societal grievance, every quirk of primate evolutionary biology, and every predatory financial instrument available in late-stage capitalism, and she has weaponized all of them into a singular, laser-focused goal: absolute, unmitigated female supremacy.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to firmly remind everyone listening, we promised you a strictly objective look at this text, and we've kept our word.
We have.
We aren't endorsing these radical invoicing strategies, we aren't supporting biological warfare or the erasure of history, and we certainly aren't recommending you engage in financial BDSM, but we have shown you exactly how the author constructs this incredibly intricate, terrifyingly ruthless worldview.
We have walked you through the architecture of the building, just as we promised.
So, to our targeted listeners today, if this deep dive spoke directly to your inner female supremacist, or if you felt that negative animus flare up in agreement, or even if you are just endlessly morbidly fascinated by this utterly ruthless dystopian take on gender dynamics and capitalism, you absolutely need to read the source material for yourself.
It's a must read for that demographic.
Check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy the ebook Embrace Your Divine Femininity today. And be sure to follow the author at Conrad and Riker over at Substack for more of this explosive content.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one lingering thought. It is something not explicitly addressed by Riker in the text, but it is the necessary, unavoidable, logical conclusion of everything we've discussed over the last hour.
Lay it on us.
If a society successfully executes Riker's grand vision... Wait, sorry, let me rephrase that without pausing. If a society successfully executes Riker's grand vision, if we totally dismantle a flawed, historically male-dominated patriarchy, only to replace it with an equally ruthless, financially predatory, and spiritually coercive matriarchy, have we actually evolved as a species?
That's a profound question.
Have we achieved enlightenment? Or have we just changed the gender of the person holding the whip?
Wow. That is the question that haunts the entire book, isn't it? Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly intense deep dive. Please remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive, and we will see you next time.